Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all having a wonderful day, and let's get into today's video. Today we are going to Japan. This story involves one of the most infamous criminals in Japan, a story that was so insane that it was made into a movie and a book. But before we get into it, we are going all the way back to Coventry, England. Lindsay Hawker was born on 30th of December 1984, making her a Sagittarius. Lindsay was from Coventry, England. Her father is Bill Hawker and her mother is Julia Hawker. Her family came from Brandon, a village outside Coventry. Lindsay had two sisters named Louise and Lisa. Lindsay had a happy and privileged childhood. She had a big personality and she was very confident. Lindsay went to the King Henry VIII school, where she was very popular among students and teachers. When Lindsay was older, she volunteered at a local primary school, helping disabled children learn to swim. It is also said that she knew a little bit of martial arts. In her spare time, she loved to read, and she would often spend hours reading a book from cover to cover. After completing college, in 2003, she got into University of Leeds, where she studied biology. In 2006, Lindsay graduated with a first-class honors degree. Lindsay had plans of getting a master's degree, but she always wanted to try something new. She wanted to see more of the world. So before pursuing her master's degree, Lindsay decided to do some traveling, which she believed would bring a new perspective to her life. So in October 2006, at the age of 21, Lindsay moved to Tokyo, Japan, planning to stay there for a year. There, Lindsay began a teaching job at Noah English Language School, which is Japan's biggest private English school. It is considered a very prestigious school, and Lindsay was lucky enough to land a spot as a teacher there. She was in one of the most interesting cities in the world. She further moved to Chiba, where the rent was cheaper, and she would share an apartment with two other teachers from the same Noah English Language School. And soon, all three would become really good friends. 3 months later, Lindsay's parents and younger sister Louise came to visit her for her 22nd birthday, which her parents would later say that they would treasure the memory of the night forever. Lindsay was having a fun time in Tokyo, and she always kept in contact with her family and friends and boyfriend via Facebook, Skype, texts, and phone calls. And soon 6 months would go by of Lindsay being in Japan. Then in March 2007, Lindsay had an awkward encounter. Just like every day, Lindsay finished her work and headed to the train station. When she got out of the train, a man also got out of the train and started following her. As she was unlocking her bike, a man approached her from behind. The man falsely claimed to be her student and said, "You are my English teacher." But Lindsay recognized all of her students, and she was pretty sure that he was not her student. Lindsay would politely avoid the conversation and started to cycle away. But the man would continue to follow her. Lindsay was confused with this interaction, so she sped up. But the man also started jogging, and then his jogging turned into running. And with the busy intersecting ways, it was impossible for Lindsay to get away from the man, so he continued to follow her, and kept trying to start a conversation with her, but Lindsay continued to ignore him. And soon, she would arrive at her apartment. The man followed her there and made a proposal to Lindsay. He asked her if she would be able to provide him with English lessons, because he felt like he needed some help with the language. Lindsay would refuse the offer at first because she had work and a busy schedule, and the days that she had off, she liked to go out and hang out with her friends. So before leaving, the man asked Lindsay for a glass of water in her apartment, as he was very exhausted because of all the running. Lindsay felt bad for the man and would allow him in her apartment. Lindsay also had two other roommates, so it was a way to show the man that she had company with her at all times, and if anything happened, her roommates would come and help her. Also, her roommates would also see the guy's face, just in case. While inside Lindsay's apartment, the man would make the offer again, and this time he would offer to pay her 3,500 yen per hour. Lindsay thought that this was easy money, and even though she was earning good money from Noah, she didn't mind some extra money. So Lindsay would accept his offer. The man appreciated her for accepting the offer, but before he left her apartment, he took out a pen and a paper from his pocket and made a sketch of Lindsay. And he would also write his name, phone number, and email address. And then he would give the paper to Lindsay and leave. Lindsay would later tell her boyfriend about the incident through email. Few days later, on 24 March 2007, Lindsay would arrange a teaching session at a cafe with the man. That unfortunately would be the last time Lindsay would be seen alive by her friends and her family. Later that day, Lindsay failed to show up for her work. Lindsay also didn't reach her apartment, which would worry her roommates, because they knew Lindsay had a teaching session with a man earlier that day, so they would report her missing. Lindsay further missed 2 days of work, and now the panic would start to sink in because it had been 3 days since Lindsay was missing. Her family back home were also worried because no one had heard from her for the past 3 days. Then Nova English School contacted her family to tell them that Lindsay had missed past couple days of work and also reported her missing at about 2:30 p.m. of 26 March 2007. That is when the police would go to Lindsay's apartment and question her roommates. Her roommates would then tell the police about the man and the whole incident that happened. They would also hand over the paper on which the man has left his information. So, at about 5:40 p.m., 2 police officers reached the man's apartment, which was on the 4th floor. They noticed the lights inside the apartment were off, but there appeared to be someone inside. So the police would call backup, and soon 7 more police officers would arrive outside the man's apartment. And almost 2 hours after the officers assembled outside, the man would then come out of his apartment wearing a rucksack and was barefoot. The man would try to run away from the police officers. One of the officers managed to grab his rucksack, but the man continued to flee. The police officers had no walkie-talkies or radios, so the officers on the 4th floor could not alert the officers on the ground floor. The building's hallways were also very narrow and confusing, which made it hard for the police to keep up with him, and would disappear in the middle of Tokyo City. There wasn't much in his rucksack though, it only had his gym clothes. The police would then enter his apartment, and they would be welcomed with a very gruesome scene. Lindsay's possessions were scattered around the room, and it wouldn't take long for officers to spot something odd. They found a bathtub in the balcony, and inside the bathtub they would find badly beaten body of Lindsay Hawker. Her body was buried under a mixture of soil and sand, with only her right hand emerging from the sand. Along with sand and soil, a decomposing agent was also present to help with the decomposing process of the body. And on top of the sand, flower seeds were scattered. Lindsay had been bound and gagged, and her head had been shaved. Her body had several bruises. Her upper body was covered in bruises, which were believed to be from collision with furniture, while a big bruise on the left side of her face was said to have been inflicted with a fist. A postmortem would reveal that she had died by strangulation. This is where a very long manhunt for the man would begin, which would continue for years. The man we are talking about is Tatsuya Ichihashi. Tatsuya Ichihashi was a 28-year-old man. He was born on 5th of January 1979, making him a Capricorn. He was born in Gifu, Japan, and grew up there, and would later move to Ichikawa. Tatsuya belonged to a pretty successful and well-off family. His father was a neurosurgeon at a hospital in Chiba, while his mother was a dentist. In 2005, he graduated from the Department of Horticulture at Chiba University. After graduating, Tatsuya didn't work at all. He did not make any efforts to find any work, but instead he would live off of a monthly allowance of 100,000 yen from his parents, because of which he was able to afford a 3-bedroom apartment in Japan. It means that he was living very comfortably as a jobless man. Tatsuya is described as a loner. He had a girlfriend and had a very stable relationship with her at the time of Lindsay's murder. His then girlfriend and people who knew him would say that he was obsessed with physical fitness. He would go to the gym every day and would cycle around 25 kilometers every day. He also liked to read violent manga. He's also described as a little withdrawn and rebellious. Tatsuya had no previous convictions with the law, but he would steal sometimes to get by. Tatsuya had also been a subject of an allegation of a prior theft and an injury. Allegedly, he had tried to rob a woman on the streets and assaulted her, but there were no charges pressed against him, and the matter was settled outside of the court. It is said that allegedly his father paid the woman around 1 million yen, because of which he never got any punishment or any trouble for it. His girlfriend would say that it was at the start of 2007 when Tatsuya started claiming that he was becoming mentally unstable. The same year he would meet Lindsay. The day of Lindsay's killing, earlier that day, Tatsuya and his girlfriend were in his apartment, and they were fighting and bickering about something. So she left out of anger, but then would later come back a few days later, and that is when she would see all the crime scene banners outside his apartment. So now back to Tatsuya's apartment. After finding Lindsay's body, they also found a lot of wigs in his apartment, alleging that he was maybe a cross-dresser. By the next morning, Tatsuya was officially a wanted man across all of Japan. His posters were scattered all across the city, and his face was shown on several news sites. Even life-size cardboard cutouts of him were put out, in case anyone has seen him. But despite all these efforts, the man was nowhere to be seen. Several sights of Tatsuya were reported for the following days, but each would lead to a dead end, with no further information. This search for Tatsuya would turn from weeks to months to years. Lindsay's family back home were restless, and they were not getting much information. Lindsay's father would claim that the amount of information he has received from Japanese police has been decreasing in the recent weeks. Lindsay's father would wear a t-shirt with a wanted image of Tatsuya and would hand out leaflets to the passengers who were departing Heathrow Airport on the flights to Japan. Lindsay's family would then fly to Japan a few months after her death and would do everything they can to single-handedly raise awareness towards Lindsay's case. Lindsay's family would set up a Lindsay Hawker webpage to help track her killer. Her father would meet with the members of Japanese mafia and give them 2 bottles of whiskey as a present before asking them for their help. Lindsay's family and Japanese police would begin to argue, and soon Japanese and British media would be involved. Because of all these efforts, Japanese police were in the question that how was one guy able to ditch 9 police officers? Not only that, but Tatsuya's wanted posters had picture that was 7 years old. Tatsuya's father said that he hoped his son would be brought to justice, saying, "You committed a crime. You must be brought to justice. I want you to atone for what you did." His mother had called a daytime television program and urged her son to give himself up. She would say, "It's Mom, Tatsuya. Dad and Mom have decided to speak about our feelings, although we know you won't like this." On 13 of March 2008, police also decided to release images of Tatsuya in wigs in case he was disguised as a woman. They also released the sketch that Tatsuya had made of Lindsay in hopes that someone might recognize the drawing style. In October 2008, almost 140 officers had become a part of this large investigation. Despite over 8,000 reported sightings and widespread media coverage, officers admitted that they were no closer to finding Tatsuya. There were different theories that maybe Tatsuya committed suicide or maybe he escaped to Philippines. Meanwhile, Tatsuya is still on the run. He traveled across most of Japan while remaining unnoticed. He also lived in a concrete bunker on a remote island to avoid getting recognized. In 2009, Tatsuya was living in Osaka. Tatsuya would travel by trains, ferries, or just by walking. He would mostly stay in rural areas, even going to Buddhist temples in the mountains. He also spent some time in a small island of Oha, where only 4 families lived. There he would eat wild fruits, fish that he caught, and even ate snakes when he got really hungry. Further into his time in Osaka, he would live in internet cafes and work at different construction sites, making sure to not stay at one place for too long. He would also wear hats and white masks to not get recognized in public. But in Asia, it is very common to see people wearing masks all the time, so it wasn't suspicious at all. Tatsuya would say that one time he was watching TV and he saw his own face and he started to tremble and shake. Another time he was walking by a police station and saw his own wanted posters, and that is when he decided to alter his own appearance. He had changed his appearance by self-mutilating. He had cut off his mole by using a box cutter and would cut parts of his lower lips with a scissor. He also tried to sew his nose using a thread and needle to give himself a nose job, but it wasn't enough for him. So, with the money that he had saved up, which is said to be about $12,000, he would put most of that money towards plastic surgery. On the other hand, by the summer of 2009, police were really desperate to find Tatsuya. So, on 26 June 2009, his reward would increase from 1 million yen to 10 million yen. They also revealed statements that they believe that Tatsuya has performed plastic surgery to change his appearance and that people should be on the lookout. And this time it worked, because on October of 2009, a plastic surgeon located in Nagoya informed the police that he believed that he has just worked on Tatsuya. Tatsuya had agreed to take before and after pictures of his surgery, and these were the same pictures that would be shared with the police, which would later be released to the public. Tatsuya knew that this completely blew his cover, and he was right, because a co-worker of Tatsuya from a construction site in Osaka recognized him. Tatsuya had worked there for over 14 months. Tatsuya knew that it was time to get out of Osaka, so he planned on moving to Okinawa and then staying in an abandoned bunker found on its remote islands. But before that, Tatsuya's luck would run out, because on 10th of November he tried to flee to Osaka's ferry port. That is when a worker at the ferry port has recognized his face and informed the security that this man could possibly be the wanted Tatsuya Ichihashi, and it would be a matter of time before police came to the ferry port and found Tatsuya. After coming face to face with the police, Tatsuya knew that it was over, so he admitted that he was in fact Tatsuya Ichihashi. Tatsuya Ichihashi was finally caught after almost 2 years and 6 months into his run from the police. So what exactly happened on the day Lindsay went missing? Back to 24th of March 2007, Lindsay arranged a teaching session with Tatsuya at a local coffee shop. They both were captured on the CCTV camera while grabbing a drink. On the footage, Lindsay can be seen touching her hair a lot, which most of the times means that you're either nervous or uncomfortable, and she would take a few steps back every time Tatsuya came too close. So after their teaching session, Tatsuya had actually forgotten his wallet at his apartment. So he told Lindsay that he lived nearby and she can come with him to his place so he can pay her. Lindsay would agree and both hopped into a taxi and towards Tatsuya's apartment. Since Lindsay didn't bring her bike that day, she would ask the taxi driver to wait for her. The taxi driver would agree and she would leave with Tatsuya to his apartment. The taxi driver would wait for her for almost 7 minutes, but she didn't come back, so he thought maybe she changed her mind, and without thinking much of the situation, the taxi driver left. It is believed, once they were inside his apartment, he tried to assault Lindsay. Lindsay and Tatsuya were both said to be familiar with martial arts, but Tatsuya was a black belt. So after a lot of struggle, Tatsuya was able to overpower Lindsay. Tatsuya would strangle Lindsay, breaking the cartilage of her neck and eventually killing her. And it appeared with the bruises present on Lindsay's body that she suffered a prolonged attack. Tatsuya had bought the materials to bury Lindsay over 6 visits to his local hardware store on the same day he escaped the police, which was on 26th of March 2007. Tatsuya was initially charged with abandoning a body. He would later be served 2 more warrants for rape and murder. Tatsuya refused to speak up about what happened at first, but when they told him that he might face a death penalty, that is when he started to speak up. He would tell the investigators that he lured Lindsay into his apartment and raped her. He claims that he didn't mean to kill Lindsay, but since she was screaming and making noises, he only wanted to silence her because he feared that the neighbors might hear her. So he put her in a chokehold, but he accidentally ended up strangling her. He also claims that he tried to revive her after, but it didn't work. This would be the defense that would be used in the court, but it wouldn't work because Lindsay's body was found with scarves and plastic ties tied around her neck. It would take him 8 months to finally meet his jury. On 4th of July 2011, his trial began. A lot of attention was on how Japan's court system would punish Tatsuya. Since this case was hugely publicized, a lot of eyes were on the court system and how they would punish Tatsuya. And although Lindsay's family had asked for a death penalty for Tatsuya, the court felt that death penalty was not appropriate as he had no previous convictions, and they believed that there was a chance that he might be rehabilitated. On 5th of July, he would confess to the murder of Lindsay, but would claim that it was an accident. On the 21st of July 2011, Tatsuya was sentenced to life in prison. Tatsuya was 32 at the time of his conviction. Lindsay's family after the trial would talk to the media, saying, "We waited a long time for today. We waited 4.5 years for justice. Lindsay loved Japan, and you have not let her down. Ichihashi, you have taken away precious life, destroyed a whole existence, and stolen countless memories from us." Shortly before Tatsuya's trial began, he had written and published a book. Most of his book describes how he spent his 2.5 years on the run and what he had to do to avoid detection. This book was named Until I Was Arrested, which sold over 100,000 copies worldwide. Tatsuya offered all the royalties and profit of the book to Lindsay's family, but of course they rejected because no attempt at good deed would bring their daughter back. Tatsuya never mentions the actual killing of Lindsay in his book or any motive of why he did what he did, but instead the book was all about his emotions and his feelings. But he wrote an apology and how he was so remorseful for doing such a stupid thing. In April 2012, Tatsuya's lawyers appealed his sentence, repeating his claim that Lindsay's death had been an accident. The court maintained that Tatsuya had acted by choice when he killed Lindsay, and it was a premeditated murder. His appeal was rejected. Tatsuya will be eligible for parole in 2022. After Tatsuya's arrest, he kind of became a cult hero. And we see this happening all the time. With serial killers like Richard Ramirez or Ted Bundy, they have their own cult following just because they might be good looking or that they don't look like killers. Similarly, Tatsuya was flooded with admirers who gave him nicknames such as Ichi-sama and Tobo-oji. Some of his fans claim he could not have murdered Lindsay as he looked too kind. Some comments made by his fans include, "When he was arrested, I thought his disheveled black hair and the line along his neck to his jaw made him look so sexy. He's really cool." A Japanese clinical psychologist, Aya Matsumoto, would say, "It seems to me that anyone who appears on television here in Japan is immediately elevated to some sort of star, and these people are unable or unwilling to associate Ichihashi with Miss Hawker's death. I would imagine that a lot of these women who are posting consider Ichihashi to be a helpless young boy and have fallen in love with that image. They almost have a mothering instinct and a need to care for him." Not just in Japan, but it happens everywhere. These women's naivety and lack of empathy for the killer's victims makes these attractions all the more repulsive. In September 2008, a three-part radio play loosely based on the Lindsay Hawker's case called A Tokyo Murder was broadcasted by BBC Radio 4. In 2013, a movie called I Am Ichihashi, Journal of a Murderer was released, starring Japanese actor Dean Fujioka, which was based on Tatsuya's book. This movie was heavily criticized by Lindsay's family, saying that it's distasteful and an insult to her memory. The film director would later defend the movie by saying that they didn't intend to dishonor Lindsay, but the film was made to explore the mind of a killer. I think this story kind of teaches us a lesson of how people use your kindness against you. If you ever find yourself in a situation where someone might be following you or you might suspect someone following you, never lead them to your house or where you live, because once they know where you live, it can be a lot more dangerous. Try to take yourself to a public place or just surround yourself with people and ask someone for help or just call the police. And if you can, just go to the nearest police station. Lindsay was a kind young woman whose kindness was used against her. That's it for today's video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.